All right, welcome bio-influencers to Discover the Art in STEM. As you're arriving, you can see a copy of Amanda Gorman's incredible poem, Earthrise, on your screen. Please take a moment to read the poem and then pick your favorite passage from this poem. You're going to put that passage in the chat with a note as to why it's your favorite. You can see a couple of great answers already. But for ease of use, because these are long passages, we numbered them, so all you have to do is put the number in the chat. The harm of willful ignorance. Yeah, that one's about environmental justice, right? The people who are going to suffer the effects of climate change the most are the people who are already suffering the most right now on planet Earth. Totally, Monica. Uncontroversially right. It's not about protecting it for ourselves. It's about protecting it for our kids and our kids' kids. Christina likes the hope in number 12. Yeah. I don't know if y'all recognize her name, but this is the same incredible poet laureate who performed at the inauguration, her incredible poem called The Hill We Climb. So since seeing her at the inauguration, I've started to follow her and I found this amazing poem. Yeah, amazing grace. We're going to solve problems by using our imaginations, right? That's what science is all about. Definitely Sabrina, number 1. All right, let's take about 1 more minute here as people are trickling in. Welcome to Discover the Art in STEM. Take a quick read of this incredible poem by Amanda Gorman and then pick your favorite passage and put that passage in the chat with why it is your favorite. And of course, these passages are large, so we numbered them to make it easier for you. All you have to do is put the number in the chat. Yeah, you're right, Ava. It is urgent. If we all band together, we can make some incredibly huge changes. Calling everyone to do their part. Yep, we got to rise up to do our part. These are great responses, everybody. Yeah, I actually struggled. I had a hard time picking my favorite passage because I like this poem so much. All of it I think is important. Okay, friends, so we have a lot to cover tonight. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome again. I'm Sam Wins, and this is Beata. Beata, you want to go ahead and wave? Beata and I are going to be your team leads on this STEAM journey tonight. And we wanted to begin with this poem, Earthrise, by the incredible poet laureate, Amanda Gorman. I'll just say that 400 times. She's incredible because, well, I love it, but also to demonstrate to you how different forms of art, in this case, poetry, can be an amazing way to engage people in science or scientific concepts, okay? In fact, art has been used to communicate science for a very long time. The idea of incorporating art into STEM isn't all that new. Surprise, surprise. And for more on that, I'm going to pass it over to Beata. Beata, go for it.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Perfect. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. Thank you, Sam. And welcome everybody else to this session on discovering the arts in science. And so, as Sam already said, we'll be focusing on the intersection between science and art. And we will discuss about how art can not only communicate science to a broader audience, but also how art can impact scientific discoveries and research as well. So it kind of goes both ways. And we have an amazing panel of women who use their creativity in their science careers. So I want to thank all of them for being here and to joining us and inspiring us today. So before we start with our panel discussion, I'd love to talk a little bit about how art has been super important for science throughout history and how combining the two is a really powerful tool for science communication. And finally, I would also have some advice for you if you want to give it a try and try some science art. So before we start, just a brief introduction to me. So I'm a molecular biologist, and in the lab, I study how human cells divide. And the aim is to improve the way we treat cancer. And along my academic career path, I also create science, art, and fashion. And I do this because I love to share the beauty of biology with the world. So I started out with a really traditional career in science. And my journey towards combining science and art was a little bit less straightforward. So I always loved arts and science when I was younger, but when I was in school and I was deciding what to study, I thought I had to pick between the two. I didn't know that it's possible to combine them. I didn't have any role models at that time. So, and I believe many of us probably grew up hearing that science and art have very little in common, and either you can be a scientist or an artist. But as Sam already mentioned, if you think about it from history, it was quite the opposite back then, because drawings were really crucial to record and communicate scientific observations, and scientists actually also had to be artists. And there's some amazing examples. I just want to show you a few of them. So you're probably all familiar with Leonardo Da Vinci. He really brilliantly combined art and science and engineering. And even though he may be best known for his artistic masterpieces, he was also an amazing engineer and scientist. And all of the skills that he developed as an artist, like his perception and attention to detail, enabled him to draw really accurate representations about biology and about his inventions. So that's one really nice example. And then perhaps some of you might be familiar with these drawings as well. So these are Darwin's finches, and they helped Darwin figure out how natural selection works. So he observed his finches when he went to the Galapagos Islands, and he noticed that there were different species on every different island. And so he collected samples and created really detailed entries in his notebook. And then this really helped him to kind of connect the dots and kind of see the pattern that there's a natural selection and it shapes the organisms so that they are better suited for the environments. So it was these notebook entries, among other things, that helped him come up with this theory of evolution as well. And today, of course, we're all familiar with evolution, but it wasn't always like this. So many non-scientists back then were skeptical, and it was really hard to convince them about such a novel and unfamiliar concept back then. And it was actually science art that helped for this as well. So these beautiful representations of marine organisms by Ernst Haeckel, and then also the drawings of pigeons. These are drawings of pigeons that Darwin was breeding for his science. And they all really helped convince the general public that natural selection and evolution are real and really amazing concepts. And finally, here are some really beautiful drawings of cells created by Walter Fleming. And so what he did is he actually drew what he saw under the microscope. There were no cameras, no computers back then, and it's actually amazingly accurate looking at it today even. So he was the first one to observe and draw how the chromosomes during cell division, how they move apart so that each daughter cell can receive their correct amount of DNA. And actually much of what we know today about cell division is based on his observations. So all of these people were basically both scientists and artists, and their work made a really huge impact on how people think about science and the world around us. And this is still true today, but nowadays we also have many more amazing ways to express the beauty of science beyond traditional drawings. There's new media, and this basically continues today. So when I started studying science, I didn't know any of this. So I had no idea what to expect. But during my master's thesis, I started doing a lot of microscopy. And I was using these huge fancy microscopes to take pictures of the very tiny world inside the cells. And I was really fascinated by the beauty of cell division. And I couldn't believe that these images, they are so beautiful, but never really get shared outside of the scientific community. So I had the idea to try some artistic experiments and print them on fabric so that I can wear them and show everybody how beautiful what the cells are that we are made of. And I also had a lot of fun experimenting with different ways to communicate my research. So at that time, I was looking at a lot of microscopy images, for example, images like this. Do you have an idea what this could be? If you have a guess, just go ahead and type it in the chat. I'm curious to hear what you think. Any ideas? Oh, separation step of cell division. Perfect. That's great. Yeah, that's basically already really accurate. I see some other guesses. There's neurons and great. Yeah, so basically, yeah, that's a part of cell division. And it's a real microscopy image of a dividing human cell that is in the stage called cytokinesis. So this is when the contents of the cell are divided between the two new daughter cells. And the blue structures in the picture is the DNA, And the green structure shows the connecting bridge, which has to be cut for the cells to separate and finish cell division. So if you're familiar with these images, you can kind of tell what's going on, but it's very blurry because cells are very tiny and even the best microscopes have limitations. So I created this drawing to show exactly the same process in a different way. So basically I drew two cells, literally using scissors to cut each other apart. And so even if you don't know what the drawing is about, you immediately get the idea that something is being separated. And it made it really a lot of fun to explain my research to the people I was working with. And I started using this drawing as part of my scientific presentations. And I realized that people could remember my research even years after I presented it. And this inspired me to start creating more drawings about all kinds of scientific concepts. And I realized that that art is a really powerful tool to communicate science. So in retrospect, this might sound very straightforward, but in reality, there was a lot of trial and error, and there was a lot of things that I learned along the way that I didn't know at the beginning. So now, the final part of this presentation, I would love to give you some advice for things you can do if you want to explore the world of science and art. So this is some advice that I wish I could have given to myself when I was starting out. So, but the fact that you're all here already means that you're already way ahead of me compared to when I was at your stage. But maybe next time you work on a science project for school or for a science fair, try to find a creative way to explain your own project to maybe to your peers and teachers and parents. You can do anything you want. You can dress up, you can create drawings and jewelry, or write a story, anything you really want. And try it out with other people and see if it makes them more curious to learn about your science and see how they react to that. So that's something you can try. Another thing is try to find like-minded people and really don't be afraid to reach out to people who inspire you. So when I started, I wasn't really using social media very much, and I thought I was the only one combining science and art. But when I started sharing my art online, I realized that the internet is an amazing place for science art. There's a huge field. There's a lot of creative scientists and non-scientists who create science art. Make sure you check out some of these hashtags on the slide. They're really great to find some science art inspiration. And so basically, I would say there's no need to hesitate to ask for advice or support from people who inspire you. Don't be afraid that you're bothering them. They will be happy that you reach out to them, that they can be your role models, and they can only help you if you reach out and ask for it. So make sure, don't be shy, make sure you connect with them. And also try to find opportunities to participate in events and competitions for science art. And even though these opportunities might not be visible immediately, they are there if you keep an open mind. And it will be like this: once you see a project, once you start, you will find other projects and it will all open up even more opportunities, and you will get into that. And remember that there might be more like-minded people around you than you might expect. So I realized this when I organized an art show in Ensenada at a conference. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to leave an open wall for students to bring their own art. And the next day, people brought the art, and we couldn't believe all the amazing artwork that had filled the wall. And so people were bringing their drawings, their pictures, even sculptures, and they made it at home. They never intended to show it to anybody. But all it really took was an open space, and people were able to share their creativity. They were being appreciated for the talents, and they realized that they are not the only ones doing that. And I found that really, really inspiring. And finally, my last piece of advice: try to treat your passions like a fun experiment that can lead to some adventures, but maybe even a new career. And speaking of careers, this is what we're going to focus on for the rest of the session. So we're going to talk with some amazing women who have careers who combine creativity and science. And that's really super exciting because nowadays we have so many new ways to take art and science to the next level. So we have new media, new technologies, and completely new possibilities. And in my last slide, I just want to show an example for using new technology to highlight the beauty of science. And that is a video game. So that's a video game called Microscopia that I'm working on. And it will be a game where you're basically inside of the cell and you can explore the beauty and the universe in there. You can solve puzzles that are based on real molecular mechanisms and just appreciate the depth and vastness of the molecular world in every single little cell. So it's still a work in progress, but you can check out the link if you want to stay in touch and if you want to try it out. And I think that's a good transition to start the panel discussion and welcome the speakers. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm going to want to beta test that video game, Beata. I could not be more excited about that. And thank you for that enlightening look at art and science, both from a communication partnership and in the enhancement of science itself. right? Like Darwin kind of cementing his idea about natural selection and therefore leading to the theory of evolution, right? But through his artwork. So Beata touched a bit on art in modern SciComm, right? Just a second ago, like the work that she's doing in science fashion and her video game here. And we're going to shift gears a little bit into thinking about how we can blend art and STEM in contemporary ways, all right? So I've got a question for y'all that I'd like you to either enter into the chat, or you could use the raise hand function if you'd rather unmute your mic. And my question is this: what is one way that you have had science communicated to you? So we're not talking from science class. We're thinking about other methods of science communication. So feel free to think outside the box here. What's a method that you have had science communicated to you in maybe a modern way? I'm going to type that into the chat. And everyone can participate. This is for everyone. So what is one way that you have had science communicated to you that might be a little different, might be a little modern? Excellent. Yeah. TV shows, right? Games and simulations, augmented reality. You got it. There's one being made for the Park Service right now for urban parks. That's an augmented reality game like Pokemon Go, which I think is super cool. Anime, there's a Cell at Work series, songs, comics, music, right? Lots of music here. Hands-on experimentation. Yeah, hands-on is always better when it comes to science, right? YouTube videos, man, I love me some YouTube. Social media, songs and videos, being outside, research proposals. Look at all those great answers. You got it, right? Science doesn't just have to be communicated by some tweety person in a white lab coat standing at a podium and just droning on and on about something. There's so many ways you can communicate science utilizing art, right? That utilize art. Beata's drawing, I love that. Yeah, you got it, everybody. Excellent work. So I think we're seeing that common thread, right? Science can be communicated in a huge variety of ways. So this is the perfect transition to our amazing panel of STEMinists who use art in their science and SciComm in modern, unique ways. But before we get started with our panel, I want to give you an incentive to participate. Those of you who ask questions of our panelists during the Q&A portion have the opportunity to win this incredible nature photography book by Nat Geo photographer Michael Reedy. All right, so I actually have it, if you can see right here, it's called Niche. It's filled with incredible macro photography. It's really, really quite amazing. So hopefully that'll give you a little incentive to ask a question or two. I'll be keeping track during the Q&A portion. Okay, so now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to announce tonight's moderator for the panel, Ayonnah Tinsley. Beata, can you switch slides? Next slide, please. Excellent. Ayonnah is a 17-year-old teenpreneur and advocate for STEAM education. Her biggest achievement was publishing her first children's book titled This Is What an Engineer Looks Like. And I have my copy right here, Ayonnah, which shows younger students more diversity in STEAM careers. And during quarantine, she's helped nonprofits and elementary schools with STEAM education through workshops and interviews with engineers. Ayonnah is a STEAM influencer who has had guest appearances on TV and other forms of media with a mission to increase diversity in STEAM. Take it away, Ayonnah. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam, for that amazing intro. And hello, everyone. Yeah, once again, my name is Ayonnah Tinsley, and right now I'm living in Virginia, so quite a ways away from most of you all. And I'm so honored to be here today. And I had the pleasure to be able to learn about so many new women who are able to combine science with art in ways I've never even thought of before. And it's my absolute pleasure to get to introduce them now. Okay. So first off, I will be introducing Miss Jocelyn Bosley. So she actually co-hosts a podcast called Science with Friends and is a research impact coordinator and is also an If-Then ambassador, and they do amazing work getting more women into engineering. Now we have Miss Martina Efeyini. So she is a toxicologist and actually works in college and career readiness. So she'll definitely have a lot of advice for us later on for those of us preparing for college, and her amount of experience is awesome with STEM advocacy. And next up, now we have Jaye Gardner. So she is a cancer researcher and also the co-founder of the JKX Comics group, which actually tries to increase exposure in science. And she gets to work with writing it and illustrating it, and it's so amazing. I love the comics. Okay, now we have Grace Xu. So she uses her background in biotech and biochemistry and turns scientific info into animations to make sure that her audience stays engaged through all of the life processes that go on in science. Now we have Sarah Nadiri. So she works at University of California, San Diego, or UCSD, in K through 12 STEM outreach, and uses her background in engineering along with her love for art to accomplish her goal of reaching more students through STEM in K through 12. And then so with that, now we'll get started with the questions for everyone. So now I'll start off our first question. This question can go out to anyone. So anyone is able to answer. So our first question of the night is, how do you think interdisciplinary learning should be implemented into schools? Whether this means should we completely rewrite the curriculum now, or should we just encourage clubs more? We would all love to hear your thoughts on this.
I'll go ahead and jump right in, if that's okay. I guess my feeling about this, and as I learned as a historian of science, which was itself a career that I landed on because I couldn't commit to either the sciences or the humanities. I wanted to try to combine them. And when I studied the history of science, I found out that disciplinary boundaries themselves shift a lot, and they're really artificial. And I loved Beata's introduction where she highlighted all these great examples of scientists who didn't just also do art or also do other things, but they did their science through art. They used art as a tool to further their engagement with the natural world through science. And I think that that's kind of the default condition. So in a way, I don't think that curriculum has to change, or that I think what we need to do is sort of remove those barriers that we artificially erect, and it's more of a cultural thing. Like, I've noticed that in working with middle school students, which I have for a long time, they tend to sort of move freely between subject areas a little bit more. Like, if I ask them in a math class to do a writing exercise or to draw something, they tend to be like, okay, that works. Whereas by the time they get to high school, they're more like, I'm a science person, I'm a math person, I'm not a language arts person. And so that kind of idea that you have to choose one identity or another, and Beata talked about that a little bit too. I think there are so many opportunities to just encourage what's already there in terms of the commonalities between, and to emphasize those commonalities between art and science. You're observing patterns, you're learning to visualize things that maybe can't be visualized directly. That's a key of a lot of modern science, I think, is being able to think about things that you can't directly see. And all of those things are enhanced by art. So I think even within the curriculum as it exists, there's so many opportunities to do that.
Amazing answer, Jocelyn. Yeah, I completely agree. It's like we already have all the tools there. Now it's just changing the thinking of like encouraging more critical thinking rather than just memorization, because high school is definitely goes from a huge transition to this. Would someone else like to answer this question?
Yes, I can go next, and I agree with everything you said, Jocelyn. I work with middle school and high school students, so I could definitely, feel that, especially in this virtual space. As they get older, they say studies show, especially girls, once they get out of 5th grade, that's when their interest in science declines. So we have to capture their attention, because they're used to being like not in that room with other, women and girls in science. I know when I was in high school, I was like one of the only, Black people at one of my schools, and I was the only like girl that was interested in science. So it was kind of like, oh, you don't belong here. It's a boys' club and everything. So I think as far as like education goes, is getting students involved in more activities like this. let them be a part of organizations or after school programs that cultivate their environment and science.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. All the work we do to try to get females more comfortable being in the room, and then getting more in there, getting more into those classrooms as well. And I can definitely relate to your experiences with like being the only Black person in my class and definitely feeling like I don't belong, or like, did I take the wrong class or something like that? I'm so happy we were able to stick it through. Okay, so now more into the individual questions. I would like to start off with Miss Jaye Gardner. So my first question for you is, what are some of the most important lessons that you've been able to learn through JKX Comics, and how this was able to improve interdisciplinary learning?
That is such a huge question, but a very good one. So I feel like some of the things that I learned from making comics is, in an indirect way, is to re-embrace my curiosity, because sort of similar to how, as Jocelyn was saying, we have all of these artificial barriers that are putting up as we go through our education, you know, that kind of predefine, like, you're in a math class now and you're in a history class now. As you major things, you start to specialize, and everything that you learn when you're younger is very broad, right? It's science, you're learning science. And then when you're in college, it's I'm learning biology. And then when you go to grad school, for me, it's I'm learning cancer biology. And now it's I work on pancreatic cancer. Like it gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And I realized at some point while I was in grad school that when I would go to talks and listen to other people as they explained their science and trying to learn and incorporate that into mine, I would get really bored and not pay attention if it wasn't in that very narrow realm that was my research. And that's not how you get new ideas. You get new ideas from observing everything around you, from taking out of the box ideas and learning how to apply and adapt it to your own situation. So for me, starting to do the comics reinvigorated that curiosity for other sciences that wasn't my own or that I wasn't trained to study. And that helped me start to listen more when I go to seminars for outside things, that then now I can take all of these other ideas and apply it to my science. I think, yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest thing that doing the comics has done for me.
That's such an amazing answer. And yes, I hope to everyone listening that make sure that you're always staying curious, whether that also means taking a risk and taking on a huge project, because you never know where that journey can take you. Okay, now on to our next question. This one will go out to Jocelyn. So as I mentioned before, you have your podcast. So I was wondering, who would be your dream podcast guest and why?
Such a great question. Well, obviously, all of my fellow panelists and you, Ayonnah, would top that list. But beyond that, I think I used to say for a long time. I put this link in the chat, by the way, that my dream guest was Tim Blay of the YouTube channel Acapella Science. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this YouTube channel, but if you aren't, follow the link, go to it. It's amazing. Like when I first saw his video Bohemian Gravity, which is a parody of Bohemian Rhapsody, of course, about quantum physics and string theory, my reaction when I saw it with one of my students, we watched it together, and I hugged the computer monitor when it was over. And then I said to her, you know what? I think there's just no point in being me anymore, because he just out-me'd me, and I'm not even mad about it. I'm like, it's great. I did eventually decide there was still a point to continuing to be me, so it's okay. I got over that part of it, but combining the music and science those are my two favorite things. So I actually did get to interview him though for my birthday episode this past year, and so that dream was achieved. And so I think I'll next set my sights on, there's two actually. Alan Lightman and Jana Levin are their names, and I'll pull up some links and throw them in the chat in a minute. But Alan Lightman, I think, was one of the first people who made me realize that you could reconcile the humanities and with science, and take the kinds of perspectives that the humanities affords and apply it to science. And he wrote a book called Einstein's Dreams that I read in a physics class. And it's fiction. But what it does is it is a series of vignettes about how time might work in the universe. And so this is sort of how Alan Lightman imagines maybe Einstein could have arrived at his theory of special relativity. He might have considered all of these different ways that time might work. And one of them is the way that he eventually did decide, we would call it now the correct way that time works. But of course, these other ways could be correct in other worlds, in other universes. And so it was just so mind expanding and mind blowing for me. I did a little more research about him after reading that book and found out he was the first professor at MIT to ever have a joint appointment in the sciences and the humanities. And he just does a great job of capturing, I think, the emotion of science. That's another thing I think that oftentimes the way we think about science and scientists is lacking. We think of it as being like, we talk about having something down to a science versus elevating it to an art form, maybe. And we think a lot about the emotion of art, but not so much of science. And I think that, awe and wonder and beauty are such, that's what makes science so appealing for me. And so I would love to interview Alan Lightman. Jan 11 is another one. She's sort of similar. She's more recent. She's written a couple of books called Black Hole Blues and Other Songs from Outer Space, where she uses this wonderful poetic language to talk and musical analogies to describe her astrophysics work. And so those are my two, I think, dream guests at this point.
So we all really hope that you're able to interview them soon. I'll definitely have to catch your birthday episode. I can't wait to listen to that. And yeah, I know I never even thought about that, or like I've always knew that like, yes, science, everyone thinks it's like no emotion at all, like specifically science, but it's like there literally is a science behind emotion. So of course that should be embraced a lot more.
Yeah.
Okay, so now my next question actually goes to Martina. So my question for you is, are there any misconceptions or surprises that you have found about mentoring that you think should be highlighted? Even towards like in high school, I've seen that a lot of people tend to think that mentoring won't really help them. So is there any advice out there?
That's a great question. I would say a lot of times, like students with mentoring, especially like I would say as you get older, like they're late middle school to early high school. They're like, oh, I don't know if I want to mentor. I can kind of do it on my own. And then like sometimes students are like very shy. So in the program I work with, the UMB Career Scholars Program, it's a mentoring program, but then we also do curriculum programming as well. So like I find that the high school students, that when we like in sessions like this, it's hard to, get engaged interest. And then a lot of the panelists, like from today and other panels I hosted, were saying, mentors make a difference. I would say that all high school students, or everyone in this panel, if you don't already, should have a mentor. And I mean mentors plural. I believe that, you should have a mentor for a reason. Like, for example, if you want to get a new job or go to school, you can have a mentor help you with that. And then you can have a mentor for a season where you might be in this transitional point and you need a mentor to help you with that. And then you might need a lifelong mentor, which are golden to have. That's that person that been through you, through trials and tribulations of your life. And they can tell you the real tea, and you won't get your feelings hurt because it's hard to find that person. And when you find that person, they can, like I said, tell you the real tea. And they are going to support you. They will be in the room when you're not there, because you need those mentors in those rooms, in those spaces, to get where you want to be, especially if you're trying to, do something slightly different. And one of my mentors, 2 people recommended me to her, and they was like, oh, you like a younger version of her. And I was like, wow, really? And then I met her and we clicked, and she was like, Martina, are you ready to go to work? It's going to be hard. And I was like, I'm up for the challenge. Fast forward, I'm creating a new program with the organization, and I really appreciate my mentor.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us. I know definitely mentors, they can be found for other students out there. They can definitely be found. You don't always have to think of it as like being a hard mentorship you have to apply for. You can find it in your teachers, coaches, or even just following back up with that one person you got to interview once or twice. They can be an amazing mentor as well. And as Martina said, they're going to put you to work. So definitely be prepared. And yeah, they just want to help you out, follow through on your passions. Okay, now moving on to my next question. This will go out to Miss Grace. So can you share some advice for anyone that's interested into stepping into like the huge kind of daunting world of animation?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. And it is such a big topic. So I'll make it more specific, scientific animation, because I can speak more to how to do that. This is a great time to get into scientific animation, actually, because there's so many resources out there. I myself went to a school, like I'm a medical illustrator by training, but you don't have to. So I think the most important thing to me is not about the software or the arts. It's actually having a solid foundation in science. Because when you think about it, anyone who went to a 4-year BFA in animation can animate, but do they have the understanding to dig through scientific literature, to look through the data? And a lot of times, because science is so specialized, as like Jaye mentioned before, I'm not the expert, but I should have enough knowledge of basic science to be able to ask the question and know where to look for answers. So I would say that, yeah, not necessarily that you have to get a degree in science, but at least have curiosity and able to interpret and enjoy like reading scientific information. And secondly, I think find your source of inspiration. I don't always just sit in front of my computer and do 3D animations all day, because it's a pretty difficult thing to do and you'll get tired. So I know that they are closed right now, but I love going to art museum or science museum, or even just walking the parks. I mean, I probably can get inspiration from looking at Grand Canyon or something, you know? So
Thank you so much for sharing your inspirations too. That was so interesting to learn about. And yeah, definitely, yeah, animation. Thank you so much for also being more specific about scientific animations, because I definitely, did not take into account. It's like you just have to have be like a great liaison between the worlds of arts and science to be able to communicate this to all audiences. Okay, so now my next question is going to go out to Ms. Sarah. So my question for you is, what are some ways that K through 12 education could be made more effective, whether this means using STEM, since you have a ton of experience this, or like, what are some ways that even high school students can start stepping in and help with STEM outreach with K through 12?
So thank you for having me here, by the way. You, all the panelists are really amazing and intimidating, and I am very flattered to even be here. So, you know, my go-to answer will be any kind of hands-on experience to explore what your interests are in these areas. I personally am actually really fascinated by art, but the reason why I went into math and physics and ultimately engineering was because I am actually really scared. I get really nervous. I'm nervous now. My heart rate is like, if it was a little cut, it would just bleed out in 2 seconds, because I'm just like, my heart rate is going so fast. And I was too scared to actually express myself through art. It's a very emotional, it's subjective, and I'm terrified. So I went into math and physics because it helped my self-esteem. So I think for me, any kind of exploration into any of these fields in different ways, be it like straight, you know, solving math problems, to having an art expression of science, the whole range is there. And you know, certain styles may hit you in a way that resonates with you that other styles may not. And I totally agree with the drawings being a little bit more sticky in terms of people remembering them. For example, you know, I don't know how many of you guys are playing Among Us, but I just built this little automaton to go through an exercise to learn about data science. And there are some leaps to make to learn about data science from this, but I assure you they're there. And I also, I guess, in terms of like the different styles, I wanted to also emphasize, there's a lot of evidence that shows there are, there really are different ways of learning. And it doesn't necessarily mean, one way is better than the other. Traditionally, it's my understanding that there are maybe two fundamental ways of learning. And when I say fundamental, there's probably more, there's a little bit more fluid than this kind of two that I'm describing. But one is called a patterner and the other one's called a dramatist. And the patterners are the typical, like, I want to do a puzzle, I want to solve the math problem, it's very structured. And typically engineering and sciences are catered to this kind of person. The other one is dramatists. They need the storytelling. They'll actually accomplish the same goal, but they have to have a story that goes with it. They have to have context. They have to have meaning. Why do people care about this? If I have an understanding of why this matters to me, I'll be more invested. I'll care and I'll put my heart and soul into it and I'll solve the same problem. Now, if schools are only teaching to one kind, you're excluding an entire group of people who might be able to contribute to the innovations that will benefit all of us if you actually make it more open-ended. And guess what? Art allows people the agency to decide what route and what style it means for them. So if they are a patterner, that's great. They can focus on just the mechanism aspect of things. But if they need the story, if they need it to look like Among Us to learn a little bit about why data science is important, great. That's okay too. How that's actually possible to transition our education system to be a little bit more inclusive of other kinds of learning types is something I'm still working on.
Thank you so much for your answer. And I definitely want to work on that too, with especially redefining what personalized learning is, because I feel like it's so much deeper than just students who are able to just pay attention to a teacher speaking versus students able to pay attention through a PowerPoint, like the Among Us kind of invention that you showed us. That is an awesome way, but that definitely a ton of even college and high school students could benefit from that. And yeah, thank you again for your answer. So now I'm going to open it up back to everyone to answer this question. So this is, so if interdisciplinary learning in general, like if everything you knew now was actually more encouraged throughout your grade school careers, how would have this impacted you? So kind of thinking in the perspective, do you think you would have actually been in the same career route you are now or taken it in a different direction?
I can go first. It's funny that you have that question because when I was looking at the questions previously, I'm like a big book reader and a journaler, and as you can see, my Zoom background. When I was younger, I was always that weird kid, people called me weird, in the library, reading, doing my own book reports. And we had, I don't know if you know about this, Ayonnah, but we had a Brita encyclopedia at my grandparents' house. That was our Google. And I would just read and read and read. And I was like, why? So when I was 17 and I had to write essays for college, I was talking about how I wanted to use science to impact the world. I was like, I wanted to make a change and I was going to be a vaccine researcher. But then when I got to college, I was like, and then grad school, I was like, okay, why is it not a lot of women in STEM? Why is it not a lot of minorities in STEM? And I believed that I wanted to start my own thing. So I just started blogging, started writing. And when I look back at it full circle, I'm like, I think what I know now, I still probably would have did science in the writing, but I would have definitely did it sooner. And I wouldn't have put myself in, listen to people and put myself in different silos where it's like, oh, you gotta separate the two. Because as I got older, I realized I can integrate the two. And if I do one, I'm bored out of my mind. So I need to do all of them.
Thank you so much for your answer. So would someone else like to take a crack at the question?
Yeah, I actually agree with Martina. So the thing is that I would still be in the same field. I'll become a scientific visualization person, but I would definitely embrace this path a lot earlier. Because by the time I realized this is a possibility, I was already finishing up my first graduate school. So that's how old I was when I discovered this path. And to restart, because I was working at the biotech, But after a couple of years, I just find that I really miss that creativity, you know, like having, so I actually went to arts high school, and during, I guess, university application, I felt I had to decide. Even at my, where I went for university, like you can't really double major in science and art. They didn't make it very possible, because like all the art studio courses conflicts with all the science labs. So I just wish like they, I don't know why. I hope it's changed now, but just like what Biet had introduced, like a lot of scientists like back in the days do know art. Like even I discovered this and I got so excited. Like Beatrice Potter, she's known for the Peter Rabbit books, but she's actually a scientist. Like she published literature and she knows how to draw, obviously. So yeah.
I had a little bit slightly different experience from Beata, because she mentioned that she didn't know there was anyone else like her. And I think I didn't realize that everybody wasn't like that. I didn't realize that everybody didn't also kind of think in terms of integrating science and art for a long time. And so I guess I had maybe I'm not too bright. I don't know, but I guess I was just like was sort of oblivious to those messages that you have to choose through school. And I remember taking a poetry class in college, where you know, I immediately started writing poems about science, because I mean, it's the source of so much, as I said, emotion, awe, wonder, beauty. And so I wrote about quantum physics and my experience dissecting a frog in biology lab and all of these things. And I was so confused when everybody, I mean, they all seemed excited about it, but they were all like, it's so neat the way you like integrate your science with it. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, why wouldn't you? You know, it seemed to be like such an obvious connection. So I was sort of lucky that way. But I will say, and this is a moral for everybody, that the one thing that might have made a difference is I might have been a little bit more efficient if I'd realized that there were actual careers that could combine these, because I didn't really know that there was anything that other people didn't think in terms that integrated science and art, but I also didn't know that there were careers that let you do that professionally. And so I just kept trying to decide what I wanted to do and taking forever and changing majors. And, you know, before I realized that the very exercise of choosing is the problem. It's not that I haven't found the field in science. It's that the way science is structured and the way I have to choose is the problem. And so I would say that if I had had more support and knowledge of that earlier, it might not have taken me 7 years to finish my undergrad degree. So if it takes you 7 years to finish your undergrad degree, don't worry about it. You can survive.
Got it. Yep. Thank you so much for that. Also, another perspective on this question. And then now my next question is going to go back to Ms. Jaye. So my question for you is, if JKX Comics ever became an animated show, how would it first off differ from the comics through like getting to use animation to kind of more emotions? And then who would be a voice actor you would like to have on it?
So there's one comic that we've kind of been working on in the background since I started my postdoc, because as I mentioned, I study pancreatic cancer. And that's not at all what I studied for my PhD. I studied viruses. I studied HIV specifically. So very different. Pancreatic cancer isn't caused by a virus, where there are cancers that can be caused by a virus, and HIV does not cause cancer. So very different mindsets. And I realized that while I understood the cancer aspect of pancreatic cancer, I didn't actually know what the pancreas did. Like, I knew it was an organ in the body and that it can get cancer. And that was about it, until I realized that it's the organ that produces insulin. So anything related to diabetes, like that's the organ that's failing, that isn't doing its job properly. So I have this whole idea for a series that I want to do one day. It'll probably be my magnum opus. Like if there's one comic that I can be known for, it'll be this. And if it could be turned into like an animated show, it would be even better. But basically teaching people about the different organs in the body one at a time through different diseases. So if there is an organ that you know very well, like the lungs and your heart and your brain, using a lesser known disease And if there is an organ that you don't know as well, like your pancreas or your gallbladder, using a more common disease for that connection. And the whole series is going to be called DSI, for disease scene investigation. So you could tell what I watch sometimes. But it would be formatted almost similarly, right? Where there are two agents and they're going around and talking to the different organs of the body to understand what's wrong with the organ that came in on their lab table that day. So trying to, like, we're going to go talk to skeletal muscle and see what's up and why things aren't happening. Or, okay, let's go over to the warehouse where liver works and see why the shipments aren't like going out on schedule, and sort of things like that, and iteratively sort of teach the scientific process at the same time of just getting pieces of information, how it changes your perspective. You come to a new conclusion in that process until you figure out like what the disease is that's affecting that organ. So that's the thing that I would love to do the most, that I think would be so cool as a TV show. As for voice actors, I don't know. I feel like I just end up choosing voice actors that I like already love from cartoons, like Estelle, who's actually a singer. She's the voice of Garnet in Steven Universe, and that's like my favorite character. She would be awesome as a character. But yeah, I don't think I really know specifically about voice actors, but definitely that's what, if I could transition to animation for like a science related thing, I think that's what I would do. Oh yeah, Cree Summer, definitely. He's like,
yes, to Cree Summer.
I know,
yes.
Our whole entire childhood. Thank you so much for sharing your plans for animation with us, and I really hope I definitely showed you have the curiosity and great foundation, like Grace mentioned earlier, that you would need for scientific animation. So I really hope we all get to see that in the future. So now I'm going to say our very last question just for the panel, then attendees will have their turn to ask some questions. So our last question will go out to Sarah. So I was wondering, since you have a lot of experience working at a college, I was wondering, do you mind please sharing with us some really important tips about college admissions, or the best way to either prepare or stand out, especially in a world that is actually going more towards interdisciplinary learning?
I will try, but I am not part of the admissions process or in that realm. But so somebody else might have a better advice. But it's if I guess not only obviously good grades, that seems to matter. Unfortunately, I think it's unfortunate personally, because there's so many other ways that could express what you're capable of doing. But doing volunteer internships, reach out to your local universities, ask if there's any kind of, look at the research that they're doing in their like UCSD, for example, go through and find the research that they're doing, reach out to the professors and ask if they need any support. I find that a lot of times people who stick out have these really impressive resumes, if you will, of doing research in high school, which I think is crazy. But I also found that that's because they already had the connection in some way. But that connection was only because somebody had kind of, I guess when I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this, somebody said earlier, reach out, find mentors. You'd be surprised how many people don't reach out. You'd be surprised that maybe not every single one of them will answer you back, but somebody will. If you go reach out to 10 people, somebody's going to write back something, mainly because they're going to be impressed with the fact that you even reached out. Somebody who takes that kind of initiative is already standing out, which is so counterintuitive, right? Because you think all people would be reaching out to these scientists. They're not. So that's one aspect. Internship, go to universities, maybe whatnot, but also do projects, do side projects. I mean, I feel like the internet has so many, how-tos and do-it-yourselves, and build projects, build a portfolio, build a website, use Google Sites. That's free. It's pretty easy to put together too, and put a collection of your work that you've been doing on the side. Join a club. First Robotics is a great one, which has lots of art that kind of goes with it. So I hope that was somewhat of an okay answer of trying to figure out how to get into universities or, you know, I did community college, by the way. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I think that's a great route when you're not sure. Totally fine. I took 6 years to get through, so I'm not, you know, there's no correlation to how fast you learn and how far you get. There's so much evidence out there of people that have gotten Nobel Prizes that weren't necessarily classified as geniuses. So, you know, it's every pathway is going to have a different barrier for each person, but each person is capable of going through any pathway. It's just that barrier might be a little bit different for you. And, you know, everyone can, whether, yeah. I mean, I hesitate because sometimes some of those barriers are not fair, but you know, they're there.
Thank you. Oh yeah, sorry.
No, the other thing is, I want to say that there's lots of financial support out there that I also didn't know existed, and your mentors can also help identify them for you. So if financial reasons are a reason why you wouldn't be able to get into college or didn't want to go to college, again, your mentors can help find those grants or those scholarships. Yeah, there you go. That's the right word. So try to find them. They exist as well. Okay, I'm done now. Sorry.
No problem at all. But yeah, thank you so much for your answer. I really hope you know that like all the advice you gave, even from like outside the admissions office, I really wanted to give you that question because still being in like a different area, I think you gave really great advice. You know, advice I haven't heard before, especially reaching out to a local university, because I don't really hear that before, because I feel like we always hear do the right clubs, like figure out your passions, but you giving us like a lot more clear direction, especially like giving us experience from your own experiences really helped just make your answer like so unique and better. And I hope everyone is taking notes and writing this down. And then now with that, we'll start off with a Q&A with our panelists. So now I think if anyone wants to raise their hand, or if anyone wants to write their question in the chat, I'll make sure that it'll get to one of our panelists.
I think there was a question from Nikita early on in the chat. I don't know if Nikita wants to ask it out loud or if I should try and find it and read it. She was talking about the intersections of STEM and the humanities.
Go ahead, Nikita.
Yeah, I'm just really interested in a lot of like social issues and the humanities with by still having an interest in like science and technology. But I think as Sarah mentioned, I'm not really like a pattern-oriented person, rather like a more like storytelling aspect of it. So do you have any recommendations in getting involved in the field and finding like a field that kind of tailors to the fields of addressing social issues and the humanities as well as science and technology?
Data science. Sorry, I just had to say it.
I already put in my plug for history of science in the chat, but I'll do it again here.
Somebody wrote it. Nice. Sorry. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so history of science was for me exactly what you're looking for, Nikita, a way to sort of understand the human influences and effects of science and technology. And if you're less interested in the past, I mean, first of all, history can be like 10 years ago, for one thing. So there are people who do very contemporary recent history. And there's also an interdisciplinary field called science and technology studies, which is about the history, but also the philosophy, the sociology, and the political science aspects of science policy. And so that might be something that you'd be interested in looking at as well. I went to school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. They have a good program, and Cornell was another one that, oh, Jay, are you a Badger? Yes, excellent. And Cornell has a STS, Science and Technology Studies program that might be good, but that's one avenue you could look into.
Thank you.
I also want to put a plug that the Halagiolu Data Science Institute at UCSD is founded by both computer engineers and humanities professors. So there you go.
All right, I think Sabrina Fan had a question in the chat. What is something you feel like you have to keep in mind when addressing the general public that might get lost from a STEM point of view? Like how to communicate that science to the general public.
I can answer that. So as a science writer, knowing your audience is very important. So if you're talking, to elementary school students, that's going to be very different than if you're talking to, people that are very technical. So you want to make sure you know your audience. And I would say a good test to see is like, if you can like talk to your like grandmother, or you could talk to someone that knows nothing about the topic and they can grab at least 1 or 2 points, then it's good to go. Because a lot of times, science, we use a lot of technical jargon and it's like blah, blah, blah. We can erase that. So take all of that and then put it in a way where it's easy to understand. Even though, with the vaccines, a lot of people saying, immunocompromised, et cetera, they're like, what does that mean? Say it very simple. Some people can get sick easily. That's more digestible than saying immunocompromised. And then people will understand.
I agree with that. I feel like sometimes when I was teaching kids, I'd forget what I know wasn't something that was easy to understand when I was first exposed to it. So taking it slow and trying to unpack it with as simple of terms as possible it's something I still have to remind myself to do.
I'm cracking up at Sam's comment in the chat. There's no such thing as a general audience, because I say that all the time, and I have experience. I curate a website called Fun Size Physics, and we solicit contributions from physicists across the country. And in the beginning, we told them to write for a general audience, and it became immediately clear that they had vastly different concepts of what a general audience understands. So we adapted it, and based on my experience with this particular group, we said, write it so that a bright, interested middle school student could understand most of it. And then they went, I mean, they still don't always remember, but it's a lot closer to the mark. And so now whenever I give talks about science communication and I tell this story, I always say that the one thing that we could agree on about a general audience is that it wasn't this cue slide with a picture of a bunch of military generals, which I find hilarious. But for some reason, people don't always laugh at that. But I like it. It's funny to me, so I leave it in. If you can't amuse yourself, who can you amuse?
I think one more thing that I'd probably add on to that is, especially with regards to science communication, is that if someone doesn't know a topic, or say if it's a controversial topic, providing facts to them will not change their mind. So it's not that they're incompetent and that they can't understand facts, and you just berating them with facts will do nothing. So it's almost like, how we talked about earlier with the pattern mind versus the story minds, like story and context and emotion is actually far more effective. And there's actually research of this. There is the science of science communication. That is also a field that shows that, it's not manipulative, but that's just how we naturally interact. We naturally tell stories to each other. So just providing that context is just giving that person something to hold on to for that science.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I actually came out off of a video to actually say something similar, of like trying to not be too judgmental. I think when you're communicating it, right, that you have to be very understanding of where they're coming from, and yeah, have empathy, right, when you're communicating things.
So Maya had a question in the chat. Maya asked, could you explain more about a science communication program in college? Who'd like to tackle this one? Anyone want to tackle it? No one?
Yeah,
Bueller?
I don't think when any of us were in college, we had that as an option. So I think that's why it's like blank. Because, all of us here have different backgrounds and we went, quote unquote, the more traditional route. So we don't have science communication, like as a bachelor's degree, but now we do. So in terms of like science communication, like all our panelists here have so many different areas of communication they do. So I would just like think about like an area that excites you. So if you like animation, like see if that school has a program that does animation. If you do, you know, writing or journalism, you want to see if they have that. But even then, if you like, oh, they don't have it, you don't kind of want to limit yourself to an option. But it's good to know what the school has to offer.
Yeah, other people might have more information, but I think a lot of times now it's a graduate level program. So as an undergraduate, you probably couldn't major in science communication, but you could definitely take courses in the sciences and in the humanities and maybe the journalism school. And of course, science journalism is another related to science communication, but a little more specific that you could look into as well.
Yeah, I was going to add that I only know about visual communication. So Cleveland Institute of Art has a bachelor's in medical illustration with scientific illustration.
Oh,
And Iowa State also has a bachelor, and VCU, Virginia Commonwealth, which is the undergrad that feeds into like the four main graduate programs. They have a bachelor in scientific illustration.
All right, so maybe take one or two more questions if you guys have a couple more questions, because we are a little bit over time and we want to respect everyone's time tonight.
can I add one
Any other
thing about the communication thing? Sorry.
Yeah, please, Sarah, please go for it.
I mean, I realize there's getting educated in communication, but also if anyone's afraid of like public speaking or talking about an idea, I have to emphasize practicing definitely helps. And from personal experience, I was one of those people that in public, and I still get nervous, as I shared earlier, would shake and stutter when I spoke in front of people. And would never imagine in a million years that I would be somebody who regularly talks in front of an audience. And that's just because of just practice, so much practice. And I got there. I mean, I still, again, if you bet me, I would never have thought that would actually be something. So don't block yourself. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, real courage is not about not being afraid, right? It's about pushing through your fear and doing it anyway, right, Sarah? Yeah. So way to be courageous, Sarah. I applaud you speaking with us tonight. All right, anyone else have a question for these amazing panelists before we wrap up tonight? You can unmute yourself or you can just type it into the chat. I'll give it just a second here. Yeah, as Karen said, public speaking is one of our greatest fears. There's a lot of people who are afraid of public speaking, including people who speak in front of the public a lot. Hello. Hello, Sarah. Nikita had another great question. How do you recommend pursuing these mixes of fields in high school?
I was wondering, is it okay if I like start off by answering that? Okay, cool. So with high school, yeah, since I'm still like a high school student, mixing these throughout high school and middle school, it was challenging, but something that really helped me was just joining a ton of different clubs. And also a really big thing was actually volunteering at the Air and Space Museum, because I constantly was working with children. So I had to think of different ways to actually get them interested in what I was teaching them. Because like I could have always just explained to them how planes work and I would watch their blank faces and be okay with that. But like I really wanted them to get as excited with this museum as I was, because it was such a big part of my childhood. So it's just, you just have to stay creative and stay interested in different subjects, because I always loved doing calligraphy. And that kind of helped me transition into doing digital art that like combined where I got to talk more about like STEM in that way. Or also I figured out how to tie riding a bike to how to produce the principal flight of lift. So yeah, just creating all those like kind of connections on your own and doing your own projects in high school is a really big way. And you could do that through taking different elective classes too. So just utilizing a ton of different like activities and stuff your high school provides that might not even be science related. It could be like the best way to find this like kind of interdisciplinary learning on your own.
Fantastic answer, Ayonnah. Thank you for speaking to your experience, right? I mean, this is what you're integrating in your life right now. Okay, so there's like a couple more questions in here. So Cindy wants to know, how did your families influence your careers? Were they more supportive of your pursuit of science instead of the arts/humanities? Ooh, who would like to tackle that one?
I could start. I'm pretty fortunate. So I'm a first generation American. So both of my parents are from Belize in Central America. They immigrated here in the 80s, and I have the highest education level of anyone in my family. Like I outpaced their knowledge probably when I was in 6th grade. And I don't think they ever had a thought of what I had to be other than happy. So I'm very fortunate that I haven't been pushed one way or another. I was encouraged to follow where my passions lie. We didn't have the money for me to do any sort of like the extracurricular things that, other folks might have had to like determine what they were interested in earlier. A story that I tell a lot when I give career talks is the reason why I went to grad school is because my parents' landlord suggested it. Like, I very much did not have exposure to any of this. So I didn't know what grad school was. Someone mentioned it to me and I went, okay. And that's how I like went to grad school to like get my doctorate. So yeah, definitely just like following your passions. And I think you'll find ways to connect things that you would never expect. I originally wanted to go to school for art. My brother does photography. So my parents were very chill with all of us just kind of doing what we did. As long as we went to school, because it's like, we didn't get to, so now you have to. But yeah, I think if you just follow what you like, regardless of, and I know it's hard to say, like, don't listen to your parents, like, just do whatever you want. But if you maintain that interest and that passion, those skills will be transferable in ways that you probably can't predict. And 2, you might just find ways to combine it. Like, I used to draw all the time when I was little. I wanted to go to school for art, switched into wanting to do science because I had a chemistry teacher who was also a musician, and we made a music video in my chemistry class, and I fell in love with chemistry, and then kind of circled back to doing art again. So you never know like what your journey is going to take you on. So just keep all of your passions.
I love that. I love everything you said, Jay, but I wanted to pick up on the point particularly about, kind of staying flexible and open. And I think what finally helped me get over the hump of like, I've been an undergrad and I keep taking classes and I keep trying to figure out what I want to do, was that I realized I don't have to figure out now what I want to do with the rest of my life. I just have to figure out what I want to do next. And I make the analogy to when you're in kindergarten and somebody asks you what you want to be when you grow up. I certainly would not have said a research impact coordinator, because I would have had no idea what that was. I wouldn't have said a podcaster because podcasts didn't exist yet. I wouldn't have said any of the things that I am because, they weren't part of my universe, that you're pretty much like teacher, doctor, you don't, whatever your parents are, you don't have a lot of ideas about what you can do. And similarly, even now, and even when you're in college, and even when you're in grad school, you're going to be discovering new possibilities and new pathways. So I think, yes, keeping all of those interests alive and just being really open and receptive to opportunities is really key.
And then I think we're going to end it on Jasmine's question here to kind of builds on what we were just discussing. Jasmine says she's interested in STEAM, but has no idea what to pursue. Do any of you have any specific advice about what I can do to figure it out? Everyone here is incredible and admirable, AKA also. We'd like to jump in and maybe have some pieces of advice for Jasmine on like how to figure out that journey.
I can start off with that one if that's okay. Okay, cool. So I think for Jasmine, something that can help you is definitely trying just a bunch of different clubs or activities, or think of the hobbies that you like the most. And then if you can kind of see there's a connection to STEM with it, then I think you should explore that more. Because like look up more videos like the science behind soccer, the science behind glitter. You'll find so many different things, and kind of going through like your own projects with this. Kind of going through your own projects with this, whether it's like making videos, drawing art, like whatever you like to do the most, can also kind of help you figure out like, would you want to put more time to this later on, or just like even it can even help you like with new skills later on. And then if you're asking more about like you're not sure what majors to pursue, I would honestly just look at like what colleges you're looking into the most, the colleges you're most interested in, and looking at every single major they offer, because I think that was how I found the major that I'm going into. That's like 100% interdisciplinary. It's crazy. I don't understand like the luck I had finding it, because at USC it's literally a program. And I'll put the link to it to the chat, because I feel like a lot of you guys would be interested in it. For my portfolio, you get to turn in art projects, science projects, a video idea, app idea, business plan, anything you want and anything you're interested in. And then I think like going through with all those projects I was mentioning earlier that can help you find what areas of STEAM you want. You can literally go to a school that embraces all of these different, that literally embraces STEAM. It embraces entrepreneurship. It's literally designed where you'll have more time your junior and senior year to pursue full on research projects, entrepreneurship, anything like that, and like keep focusing on like those like passion projects. So hopefully that helps answer your question, and hopefully that helps you get in like a direction of STEAM you want to go into.
Y'all, I'm sorry to say, but our time has come to an end, because some of you are on the East Coast and it is way past your bedtime. I just want to thank you so much for being here tonight and dropping some of this amazing wisdom and advice and sharing your personal experiences, right? And thanks to the incredible Ayonnah Tinsley for being here and moderating this great panel. And that's going to do it for us tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for amazing panelists, and we will see you next time.